Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. We'll be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first some of today's top stories. 4 days into the new Congress and still no Speaker of the House. California Republican Kevin McCarthy lost his 13th vote earlier today, but members are scheduled to come back into session at 10 p.m. Eastern for yet another go at it. McCarthy was able to pick off about a dozen previous no votes, but he needs to get all but 4 GOP House members if he wants that gavel. McCarthy has expressed confidence that tonight's vote might be the clincher. We'll have more on this in just a bit. Early this morning, the Illinois House passed a statewide assault weapons ban. Floor debate on the bill took place late last night into the wee hours of this morning with Governor J.B. Pritzker watching in the chamber. The bill would bar the manufacture, sale, and purchase of certain semi-automatic rifles in Illinois and then ban large-capacity magazines with 12 or more rounds of ammunition. It was spurred on by the July 4th Highland Park mass shooting. The bill's chief House sponsor, Democratic State Representative Bob Morgan, described his experience being at the parade that day.
My wife and my 2 children were right behind me, and my staffer was standing in front of me and yelled, "Gunshots, gunshots." And I reached back to make sure my children were safe. When I got to the scene, I saw those who've been shot, carried away a 2-year-old who was covered in blood because both of her parents had been shot. And this is not a unique situation.
The House also passed a bill expanding abortion protection in Illinois, and both are now being debated in the Illinois Senate. We'll have more on this as well. Local and national political leaders mark the 2nd anniversary of the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. A group of U.S. House members stood on the Capitol steps with families of police officers who tried to stave off the riot that day. This after a mob was incited by former President Donald Trump with the ultimate goal of keeping Trump in power. At a separate event today, President Joe Biden honored the officers that defended the Capitol.
You held the line that day. And what was on the line was our democracy, and history will remember your names.
Chicagoans are potentially in line for a significant spike in their gas bills. Utility provider Peoples Gas is asking the Illinois Commerce Commission to approve a $402 million rate hike. That would equal out to an average of just under $12 a month for customers, although Peoples Gas says the rate hike might be offset by a potential drop in natural gas costs. The Illinois Public Interest Research Group, or PIRG, blames the rate hike on People's giant multi-billion-dollar main replacement program, which the group dubs as, quote, out of control. And now on to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Aaron Hegarty of the Daily Line, Heather Sharon of WTTW, Clarence Page of the Chicago Tribune from Washington, D.C., and Kevin Fishbane of The Athletic. Let's set our agenda for the evening. First, try again. Will the 14th time around be the charm for Kevin McCarthy? Lawmakers commemorate January 6th today, and the Biden administration announces a new border policy. Well, let's hear from some of that debate. Here is the attention-seeking Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz on his vote against Representative Kevin McCarthy.
Several believe that one earns the position of Speaker by raising enormous sums of money, and there is no doubt that the individual that was nominated by Mr. Garcia is the LeBron James of special interest fundraising in this town. There is nobody better, but I would suggest that there are qualifications for Speaker that are far more important. There are attributes that are far more important.
No doubt this guy enjoying all the media attention he's getting from this. But Clarence Page, is the 14th time the charm for the gentleman from California?
Well, we should know before the night is over. Kevin McCarthy has assured us that he's got enough votes to be able to put himself over the top this evening, which is a tight deadline, and everybody knows about it. So he's got to stick to it. But it's been amazing, though. It's the first time since, 1923 that the vote for the Speaker is going beyond one ballot. And now we're up to 14. It's been hard to keep track of them all. But he has stubbornly resisted efforts to get him to step aside. And he was able to talk about 4 or 5 more votes across the line yesterday And so we will see what happens now. I always hate that phrase. We'll see what happens. Former President Trump used to say that all the time.
Right.
But
That was kind of a cop-out when he said it. All right, so one of those votes that switched over from the so-called Freedom Caucus to supporting McCarthy is Illinois Congresswoman Mary Miller. So what has been negotiated here to get these folks on board with Kevin McCarthy?
Well, there seems to be two major sticking points. One, the ability of any member of Congress to make a motion to remove House Speaker. So typically that takes 5 members to band together. The new rules that are under negotiation now would limit that to 1, which would make Kevin McCarthy or whoever is Speaker in a very tenuous position and really beholden to just everybody to make sure he keeps his position. The other issue is spending. Of course, these are all very conservative Republicans who campaigned on limiting government spending, and it seems to be the sticking point is not only the upcoming vote on extending the debt ceiling, but also whether or not military spending will continue to increase. It seems as if the agreement would limit military spending in the next year. Whether that will be approved is part of the second vote that we're all watching, the package of rules that will govern the House for the next 2 years.
Yeah, and that debt ceiling vote has been a game of chicken over the last several years. This might be a gargantuan game of chicken. Kevin Fishbane, who's had it worse, the Bears on an 8-game losing streak or Kevin McCarthy 0 for 13 to this point?
Well, I was going to say, Paris, as someone who's covered the Bears for a decade, I've seen dysfunction. I've seen kind of chaos within the ranks. But for the GOP to take this long, somebody texted me today and asked me about a better chance of them finding the right speaker or the Bears finding the right quarterback. So certainly lots of comparisons you could make.
Of course, my hope is the Bears already have found that quarterback. Aaron Hegarty, so what does this portend for the next couple years in Congress? If this vote is this hard, what are votes going to be like on the debt ceiling, on military spending, on the budget?
I like this. We'll wait and see, but this isn't setting it up to be good or easy. I think it's been interesting for I love C-SPAN. I love watching this, but it's also been interesting to hear my friends talking about what's going on. Is there watching.
So this has penetrated into sort of the bloodstream of mainstream America here, not just the political junkies.
I think it has, and maybe we'll see more people watching what happens in the future, but I think it'll be probably contentious.
Clarence Page, what do you expect over the next 2 years, assuming that McCarthy does have the votes this evening?
Well, for one thing, he has conceded that ability to make the speaker defend his or her job if only one member of the Congress wants to make that move. That system was in place before Nancy Pelosi came into power, and she got rid of it and made what five members have to initiate a removal motion. Otherwise, anytime somebody is mad at you for some reason, they can go to the floor and call for your removal. And that is what McCarthy is backing. That's the corner he's backing himself into by making all of these concessions. Most of these concessions we're talking about, with the exception of actual spending, of course, that's an important policy issue. But other than that, there's not much. This is mostly insider baseball, pardon my sports metaphor. But most folks don't follow Congress that closely. But the members of Congress, they want to get as much clout as they can. And Republicans want to reduce spending as much as they can without talking about what spending they're reducing. They're talking about things like Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid. These are programs that are very popular with the public. And so they don't go around bragging about it, but that's what they want to do. And so that's a contentious political issue in itself.
You make a good point. Everyone likes to say the generic phrase cut spending, but when it comes to what do you want to cut, especially if it's Medicare or Social Security, not quite as ambitious talking about those things. Heather Sharon, also this week, the Biden administration announces a new border policy that involves admitting a quota of 30,000 migrants per month seeking asylum, cracking down on illegal crossings. What do you think the impact on the border this policy will be?
Well, it will have a profound impact on the Cuban people, the Venezuelan people, the Haitian people, many of whom who have been fleeing instability and really economic catastrophe in their home countries and have been attempting to cross the border and claim asylum. Now they will be prohibited from doing so unless they're at an official port of entry. And this is designed to reduce the number of illegal border crossings, which has turned into a massive problem for the Biden administration. And those additional, spaces for additional refugees and additional legal immigration spots is meant to sort of offset those restrictions, which were deeply, deeply unpopular with immigrant rights groups and faced a huge backlash from even some members of the president's own party. It's, New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez said this was nothing more than Trump rewarmed. And of course, it's not going to move any Republican votes, and it's a little bit of the worst of both worlds for the president, who doesn't have many good options.
Yeah, I was going to say Republicans still will probably talk about the border no matter what happens here. Clarence Page, January 6th, 2 years ago, what are your recollections having been in Washington and experienced it firsthand?
I'd be delighted to talk to you over your favorite beverage and give you a description of my recollections that day. It was truly shocking to me. I was outside. I was in my car. I went over to the Capitol, see what was going on, and decided maybe I better stay in my car because more people than I could would have imagined or guessed were overflowing on Capitol Hill. And I personally felt anger, frankly, as a military veteran and a good American. I was just really angry. What are these guys trying to do? There's no end game. They just are here because the president wants them to be here. And that was a very shocking and pivotal moment in my life. Some of my colleagues were inside the Capitol when this was happening. And they can give you some really graphic descriptions of the kind of fear that was going on and the kind of mayhem that occurred in the building. And that's the kind of that really angers many folks when they hear some Republicans, some Republican members of Congress saying, "Well, it was just a normal tour group. They're basically peaceful." I mean, they tried to blame Antifa. FBI says no way. There was no signs of that. It goes on and on. This was a pivotal day though in modern American history. But
Yeah,
I think it really put democracy to the test and how much democracy.
And still a test that democracy faces to this day. Let's move on to some state and local politics. Illinois House members passed an assault weapons ban in the early hours this morning. Cashless bail is on indefinite hold pending the Illinois Supreme Court, and mayoral start to blanket the airwaves. Also, Woodlawn residents spar over housing migrants at a local school. Let's stick with that Woodlawn topic right now. We asked Mayor Lightfoot on our show earlier this week about the city's move to house the migrants in Woodlawn. Take a look.
If we're truly a welcoming city, if we're one where we say we're proud of our immigrant history, this is the time for us to step up, and it means everyone. This has got to be one of those all hands on decks moments. Obviously, we've got to do this in concert with the community, answer their questions and concerns, but we've got to find a way to move forward together.
Erin Hegarty, remind us why this is so contentious, the mayor's plan here to house migrants at this Woodlawn school.
So it's contentious because people in the community feel like they didn't have a say in what would happen, and the migrants that were being housed and fed here. And they kind of said, they speak Spanish. They should be in a community that also speaks Spanish. And I think it's just interesting to see how, it's all kind of playing out. Chicago is a welcoming city, but I don't know, where are we being welcoming and to whom, I guess?
Putting that label to the test a little bit. Heather Sharon, how do you think this ultimately gets resolved?
Well, we heard today from the mayor's office that they had planned to open the shelter to the immigrants today. That did not happen today, and it will not happen at least until Thursday when the mayor convenes a meeting with Alderman Taylor's office to discuss this issue. I think a perhaps overlooked part of this issue has been that this school was shuttered in 2013, and that has really remained an open wound in Woodlawn, because many people who see that as sort of an example of the disinvestment and the sort of disinterest in sort of investing in Woodlawn, and for the city to come in and spend $1.5 million refurbishing this school that has been vacant for really nearly a decade at this point, I think really rubbed a lot of Woodlawn residents the wrong way, especially because they didn't really have any say in the selection of this school. And of course, it's an election year, which means it's an election issue in the 20th ward race between Jeanette Taylor and Jennifer Maddox.
And of course, the older woman, Jeanette Taylor, has been outspoken against this plan. Aaron Haggerty, at the same time, the mayor is saying she needs money from the federal government to support the migrants that are coming here. How much does she need? And is she likely to get any of that? Is she getting any response at all?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to see if anything happens, you know, could it happen during the lame duck session? I don't know, but yeah,
It doesn't appear like any money is forthcoming here, and she said that the city's at its limit in terms of how many migrants. And again, these are asylum seekers, so and these are folks that have been bussed here by some governors on the border, like Governor Abbott in Texas. Speaking of lame duck, let's move on to what's happening in Springfield. The assault weapons ban that passed early this morning. First of all, Kevin Fishbane, you were at the Highland Park July 4th parade. That has kind of spurred this legislation on. Does that day still kind of have a lasting impact on you?
Yeah, Paris. It's, unfortunately something I think about every day. I was with my 2-year-old son and my father and my sister. It's my hometown, and I'll never forget the pop that we heard, and having to run and hide. Frankly, we hid in a parking garage, but I'm grateful and lucky enough that I'm here able to talk to you about it. We unfortunately knew some of the victims, so it was a scary day. It'll stick with, I think, the whole community forever. And what happened in Springfield today is it doesn't bring anybody back. It doesn't take away what happened, but you'd like to think it's one step closer to preventing it from happening. Another instance of it happening again in the state.
Yeah, and so it's a ban on certain assault rifles. It had to be negotiated a bit, Heather. So what does the final package, at least coming out of the House, look like? Well,
Originally the package would have banned the sale of assault weapons to anybody who is not 21. That came out of the final version, and now that limit is back, at 18. The other issue was would Illinois permit the manufacture of assault weapons inside the state? Originally, the law would have banned that. That has also been removed from what passed the House early this morning. So, the devil is in the details. This is going to be a subject of great debate over the next 24 or 48 hours before the lame duck session ends.
So not a cinch to pass the Senate in the form that it's in.
I think how legislation moves at these late night sessions, but there is a deadline and that there is a consensus that this ban should be passed, and the governor has said that he wants to sign it. The fact that he was on the floor of the Illinois House last night, I think, gives you a sense of what a big priority it is for the governor. Whether this law will withstand what is certain to be a court challenge, I think, is truly the fundamental question.
Clarence Page, it doesn't seem like a ban on assault weapons is going to go anywhere nationally. So a state like Illinois passing a statewide ban, does that make any impact on the problem in the country?
Not a real obvious impact, because right next door we've got Indiana. We've got other states where it's much easier to get a gun and much less regulation. You really need a national ban, and like you say, that's not in the offing. You've seen how much trouble we've had over the years just getting any kind of a local ban. The Supreme Court tossed out the last gun law the city had, and this is not something that we're going to see very soon. But I always thought, a lot of people thought that after Sandy Hook, after that massacre of little children who were like 5 and 6 years old, that surely something was going to happen. And Barack Obama, that was one of his biggest defeats. He will tell you during his term that he couldn't get anything passed, even after Sandy Hook. So it's an uphill climb, but I don't blame them for trying to keep the pressure on.
And Kevin Fishbane, you alluded to this, but is there some sense of comfort among Highland Park families, among residents there, that at least something is being done at the state level in response to this?
Yeah, Bears. I mean, there was a lot of activism throughout that was spurred from this. The March 4th group, which I think has done they've been in Springfield, they've been in Washington, D.C. It's called March 4th. It started, I think, 2 days after the shooting. So I think for people to be able to kind of see it through, obviously you don't want it to be that, spurred from something like that, from that kind of tragedy. And I think Bob Morgan said it, at some point during the week, that after that July 4th, after it happened, there were still plenty of shootings in Chicago that weekend. So, you know, I think the community will certainly be heartened by seeing something happen, even if it's not going to be the type of thing that cures all.
All right, well, let's move on to the Safety Act, the end of cash bail. That's on hold for now. The state Supreme Court put an injunction on it, said, you know, while this gets litigated, you have to stick with the old law. Aaron Haggerty, how long do you think is going to take for the Supreme Court to figure this out?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's kind of, we're in a holding pattern for an undetermined amount of time at this point. Yeah, I'm interested to see how long it takes, and, you know, even when a decision is made, you know, what comes next after that? Will we finally make this change and I think we're the first state to eliminate a cash bail system.
At least, I mean, some states have gone kind of part of the way, like New Jersey. So I think the Supreme Court has said oral arguments will be in March. So how long after that does the decision come?
Well, they've agreed to consider it on an expedited basis. They are, you know, they read the news. I hope they watch Chicago tonight. They know how much impetus this has been on this law, and I'm sure they feel the fire just as we're sort of watching for their ruling.
All right. Well, I think the Bears organization feels the fire from fans after 3 and 13 years. So let's talk about some of the items in sports tonight. The Bears mercifully end their season with Justin Field riding it out on the bench. Pressure is now on the general manager to rebuild following this disastrous season. And hopeful news, the Bills defensive back Damar Hamlin is reportedly awake and talking to teammates after that terrifying collapse on Monday night. First, Kevin Fishbane. Justin Fields said he was fine, he's ready to go, and then all of a sudden early this week the coach says he's got a hip injury. Is it fair to say if the Bears were in contention here, Justin Fields would be playing?
Yeah, I think so, Paris. You know, head coach Matty Rufus said no. You know, he had an MRI on his hip. It was a hip strain. The doctors said he wasn't clear. But we've seen Justin Fields play through a lot of injuries. He's a tough guy. So I got to imagine if this was a significant game. But this happens in the NFL a lot. You see a lot of players. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but certainly with the Bears having the opportunity to get the #1 pick, it's worth kind of, you know, scratching your head about when you see he was able to finish the game against Detroit, and now he's not able to play in the finale. But I do believe that he truly is injured. But yeah, if it was the playoffs, I would not doubt Justin Fields' ability to go out there and play.
He would certainly want to be out there. You mentioned the Bears have a chance at getting the #1 pick. There's a little bit of debate bubbling up right now as to whether they should start over at quarterback, as if Fields' heroics, at least running the ball, haven't been enough. But what do the tea leaves say about what Ryan Poles wants to do, Kevin? Is he set that Justin Fields is going to be a starting quarterback next year, with hopefully a better team around him?
I think that's... Well, yeah, and I think, Paris, that's kind of the challenge, is that he hasn't necessarily given that kind of backing before, and we're going to talk to Ryan Poles this week, and we'll see, you know, how fervent he is in terms of that kind of thing. And look, every GM wants to be able to draft their own quarterback. He did not draft Justin Fields, but he also saw how electrifying Justin Fields was this season, and even if he decides to go a different direction, there's no guarantees with any of these quarterbacks in this class, and there's never guarantees with some of these quarterbacks. So it'll be, you know, if they get the #1 pick, even if they get the #2 pick, it'd certainly be something to think about, something to consider. But it'd be hard to move on from somebody who's at least shown you what he can do. And as you said, if you get better offensive linemen, wide receivers around him, better defense, you'd like to see where they can go from there.
Especially when the Bears have so many needs to fill. You know, why start over at a quarterback when you've got an entire defensive line to build, offensive line? Do you think that Poles wants to trade back if he does indeed get the 1 or stick with the #2 pick?
I could see it for sure. You know, Brian Poles' big thing, he told me this in March, he wants to create a consistent winner. He's seen the Bears go up and then go down. You know, 2018 they were great, and then they were pretty bad in 2019. 2001 they were great, they were terrible in 2002. This has happened with this franchise for so long. He wants to create something that lasts. And to do that, he's going to have as much draft capital as possible. And that #1 or #2 pick could really bring in a lot of resources to the team. So I could see a situation where he trades back to continue to add talent to this roster.
A lot of intrigue there, and great news, as we mentioned this week, that Damar Hamlin seems to be alert and is speaking, and hopefully his recovery is going well. How do you think the NFL has handled this? I mean, they've said the Bengals-Bills game that was suspended is just going to count as a no contest. Have they done the right thing in this situation?
Yeah, I think they've done the best they can. It's just such an unprecedented thing. I will say for the NFL, the emergency action plan that we saw take place with the doctors on the field and everything they did and getting him to the hospital showed what a great plan that is. And so they should be proud of the way that was handled. And then what they've had to kind of figure out competitively is tough. Again, this has never happened before. So there was no perfect scenario. And I think really the one team that's frustrated is the Bengals. But, you know, I think you just have to kind of shrug it off and just understand that this is something that nobody knew how to handle.
Yeah, circumstances were extraordinary, and it seems like the emergency responders really had an impact here and perhaps saved Hamlin's life, because it really comes down to the seconds and the minutes in a situation like that. Speaking of seconds and minutes, we've run out of our seconds and minutes. We are out of time, but our thanks to Clarence Page, Kevin Fishbane, Heather Sharon, and Aaron Hegarty. And that is our show for this Friday night. Don't forget, you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And be sure to join us tomorrow night at 6 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, and then immediately after that, Chicago Tonight Black Voices at 6:30. And then we're back at 7 o'clock all next week. And now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a wonderful weekend.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a proud sponsor of diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused free continuing legal education for lawyers throughout the region.